Hello, everybody. It's Wendy Conrad here, work culture developer and strategist, certified chief happiness officer, and founder of Your Happy Workplace. And today, we are having returning guest Lesley George from Mosaic Inc. to talk a little bit more about race in the workplace and how we as white leaders can do better. So she is a diversity speaker and coach. She is a two-time best-selling author. What? She also has, I recently learned from her website, a master's degree in human resources. So I'm super excited to have her back on again today. We did a live together a little while back about how to be supportive in the workplace, what it's like to be in the workplace as a Black woman, and some experiences that she's had. And so here she comes. I can't wait to dig in today and talk about race in the workplace. Let's invite her. Oh, please. Lesley George, welcome,
Hey, my
welcome.
dear.
Hey, and Happy New Year to
Same to you,
you.
honey. Same to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited about having you back today. I just
Thank you.
introed you, all of the fabulous things. And I just recently learned from reading on your website that you have your master's degree in human resources. I
I
did not know
do.
that.
I
That's
do.
that's awesome.
I
It's good
think
to know.
that helps me. I've never worked in it, but I think because of that, it helps me with the human side
Oh, sure.
uh, of everything, and that's kind of where that diversity comes in as well. So yeah. So fun
Yes.
fact.
Awesome. Fun fact. So let's dig right in because I
Okay.
have a feeling that this might turn into a two-parter at the very least, because this is a big question to answer in just a half an hour.
Right.
So today we want to talk about how white leaders can do better in the workplace. And I loved what you said last time. And if you didn't watch our last live, go in my IGTV and watch it. But we talked a little bit about the foundation of understanding. And I think it really starts with that. But before we get to some tips that you have, I want to talk about maybe, maybe there's some white leaders out there leading an organization or a department or a team or whatever the case may be. And they might be feeling a fear of making a mistake.
Mm,
And so
that's a
that's
good one.
stopping them from taking any action because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to do the wrong thing. And I've experienced this myself, but I try not to let it stop me from doing something, because that's part of the journey in making
Right.
mistakes. And as a recovering perfectionist, I know what it's like to not to do anything unless it's perfect. But this is so important that we can't wait anymore. We have
Right.
to act now, and we have to, you know, be prepared to make mistakes. So talk a little bit about that and how you think that plays into the role, and maybe some mistakes that you've seen businesses make or business leaders make,
Mm, I've
to
seen brands
not
make mistakes.
yeah, and not necessarily to call them out so much as to learn from it.
That's a good
Thoughts?
question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we can really dive deep into that. I think that here's what we've learned. We've learned a lot since George Floyd. And when I
Mm,
say we've learned a lot, meaning a lot of things that minority groups have been experiencing, some have felt in the workplace, I don't need to talk about it and I shouldn't talk
mm,
about it. And I'll accept a lot of things that happen. Like on our last live, I talked about microaggressions and different things that I personally have experienced in the workplace and spoken to other colleagues and have experienced in the workplace. But you in pre George Floyd, you just laughed it off and continued. But I think with such a social, racial uprising where everyone is now listening to the conversation.
mm,
Before, people weren't listening. So it's not that the same thing wasn't said for generations. As we know, we had the civil rights movements. So the conversation has always been there. It's just that people weren't listening. So people are
Mhm.
listening now. And what I would say is, I don't think anything that a white business owner, a white coworker would say would be a mistake, because one of the biggest lessons that I think a lot of people have learned from this is saying nothing is saying a lot,
Mm.
right? So one of my favorite words now is grace. So giving someone grace with them trying to understand. And because for me, post George Floyd, I've learned that a lot of white coworkers, a lot of white friends didn't know certain things. And I think for me, for myself personally, I assumed that they did. So for me,
Yeah.
grace is really the biggest thing, because I believe if an employer, a business owner, co-worker, somebody's trying to trying to help the cause, because it's an overall cause. And to me, I look at
Yes.
it as a human cause, because whether it's the LGBT community, whether it's the Black community, whether it's the Hispanic community. So I look at it as a human cause, because one really intersects the other. You really can't you can't say that, okay, so I'm just going to hire all Blacks, and then if anybody comes to my door that's LGBT, I'm not going to hire. You know what I mean? So that diversity really encompasses us all. So I think once we start when I said the last time, understanding, the other part is just looking at it from a human perspective, because we're all experiencing this thing the same way. Now, we all may have different lanes, but we're all experiencing this. We all have this human experience. I think if we can start there, I believe that the grace will be given, that you are doing something and you want to carry this forward so that we can leave this world a much better place.
Yes,
That's
and I
really
want
what.
to extract some of what you said, and
Okay.
I think it all comes from intention. So if your
Yes.
intention is to forward the cause and to have these conversations, then making mistakes is an opportunity to learn. But
Exactly.
if I think being afraid to make mistakes and letting that stop you is kind of centering yourself. What are they going to say about me if I make this mistake or if I do something wrong? It's bigger than us as individuals. So if
It
your
is.
intent is to, make a more equitable workplace or
Yes.
to have conversations with your white friends about this stuff or to, whatever the case may be, whatever action you want to take in your realm of reality, centering the cause versus yourself is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about the intersectionality. You
Yeah.
can't say that you're for Black lives and then not be for this marginalized group and that marginalized group. It's human rights.
Yeah. It is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk a little bit too about performative action versus impactful action, because I'm that could be a whole thing in itself too. But I want to address that too before we get to like specific tips that people can do, and that kind of overlaps with intention.
True.
So
Right.
tell me how what's the difference and where do we want to go with our actions?
I think the past thinking was, let me just check off, or let me just do this implicit bias training once a year, or however often whoever does it, right? Let me just do that once a year, or let me there's I believe it's a HRC form, that every large companies have, small companies have that form too. Let me fill out that form and check and make sure everything is correct on that. That's that performative, right? And I don't even call that level 101, because in my head, for different levels of diversity, because diversity can get very deep. It and I think right now, kind of where we are is we're very much on that surface. We haven't really drilled deep, because I think a lot of people don't want to address that, and that's why, Martin Luther King died how many years ago, and we're still talking about the same thing. So that's what I'm saying. The conversation never changed, but it's really how intentional we are about doing different things because of that conversation. So I think the implicit bias trainings, those are great, but what are you going to do after that? It's not a once a year type thing. The checking off in the box, it's not a once a year type thing. It's a culture. You know, you talk about your happy workplace. It's a culture. The workplace is a culture. It's somewhere where people are going, or even right now we have a lot of people working online, right? So you may have people now choosing not to interact in that physical workspace because they knew how toxic that workspace was. So now they can create that at home. They can be in their own environment, in their own world, and not having to deal with those people or people at the office that they don't necessarily want to deal with. And I think that in itself can be a drawback because we're still not furthering the cause, because we're still not getting to the root of really and truly what should the employer really do? How do I create that culture where everyone feels like they belong? You know, my thing is diversity, inclusion, belonging, then we get to equity. And so that's a fluid road, right? So yeah, you check off the boxes. Maybe you say, okay, maybe I hired two or three people, whatever, but does that really represent? Is that really inclusion? And not only that, let's take that a step further. Do your people feel like they belong? What have you put in place from an organization standpoint, from policies, procedures, to really make your employees feel like they belong?
Yes, I love that belonging
Mm-hmm.
word
Mm-hmm.
added on to the DEI, because diversity, inclusion, and equity i- is nothing without the belonging piece. So just like you said, oh, I need to hire more
No.
people of color, but if you're inviting them into a toxic workplace that's going to be harmful to them, then you're not doing, you're doing them a disservice. So I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
all of that you just said. And speaking of once a year training, I'm going to reference a training that I took
Okay.
called Unconscious Bias by Stacey Gordon. She does trainings on LinkedIn. She
Hmm.
does and there's a whole series, there's a bunch of trainings out there now because it's so trendy. And that's why I
Right.
want to keep this conversation
Yeah.
going beyond just now.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to have discussions and conversations, whether they're scary, they can be scary, in addition to just doing the trainings. Not
Right.
just sending out an email with a link that says, hey, do this training and check off the box. That means nothing if you're not having a conversation within your workplace.
Mm-mm.
So I
Mm-mm.
love all of that you just said. What would you say to someone, a business leader, who says, well, I don't want to have these conversations in the workplace because talking about race is continuing the divide. It's making us
Mm.
being divided. What would you say to that business leader?
Here, I'm just going to go back a little bit. Here's what I believe post COVID, where we
Mm,
did not see it before. What I believe post COVID is a lot of people are going to be very intentional about the places that they choose to work. And in saying that, the intentionality behind the places that they choose to work, they're going to be looking at websites, different things, really and truly, what do you do, and so forth. So, to answer your question about, I don't want to have that conversation at work, are you looking for top talent, or you're really going to get whatever? Because that's what I believe is going to happen post COVID. Because now a lot of huge companies realize, one, yes, people can work and function 100 or 1,000% at work at home. So that's the battle that employers that have a traditional model that they're going to have to fight against. That's kind of what I believe, right? So that's one. Then you have a lot of moms that now you've shown them that, okay, so I could stay at home and I can work with my children, I can be around my children and work from home. So really and truly, it's going to be very intentional for people to choose to really go into that workplace.
mm,
So what I would say is, for the employers that do not want to talk about it, do not want to have that conversation, I really don't know what the workplace is going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years. So that's going to cost you money, right?
mm.
Because now you've not changed your model to kind of move with the way that the trends are going. you decided you're going to stay with a traditional model, and that's probably not going to attract a lot of people. So I believe that employers are going to be forced to change, to look at their model and change their model. We know what happened to Blockbuster. We know what
Yeah.
happened to several other companies that decide, oh no, I'm not going to change. Well, either you change or you go bankrupt. And I believe that this wave that we have now, we have a bunch of young adults coming into the workplace as well. So before they label millennials a certain way, but millennials are seeing things a lot different now, COVID and everything else. So yeah, so the workplace is going to look a lot different. So employers, I believe, will have to somewhat change their model and realize that not talking about it or even talking about it, it's not going to further anything. It's having a conversation that people have been dying to have. Because a lot of times, maybe the only time you may interact with someone from Asia or someone from whatever country, maybe at work, and you don't know how to translate that into your personal life in terms of, okay, so when I go home, how do I have this conversation maybe with my kids that have never been
Mm.
exposed to whatever that culture is. So what I think the other thing that COVID has taught us is we are authentic and we show up as us no matter where we go, right? And I'll tell you a reason why I say that. A lot of women, I was talking to a young lady and she was having a very hard time because of COVID, she's working from home. She has a new baby, less than a year old. And she says, I just get so upset every time the baby cries, and I have to, excuse me, I have to go on mute. And I said,
Mm.
why do you have to do that? That's who you are. You're a mom. You have a young baby at home. If the world or whoever you're in that meeting cannot understand that, then sorry for them. Because women for years have been kind of excluding themselves.
Mm.
I need to take time off to go to the doctor. So women have been excluding themselves. That's a whole nother group as well, right? So
Yeah.
women have been excluding themselves to deal with the children in silence.
Mm.
No more. So no more this silence. I am showing up authentically. I'm showing up
Yes.
who I am all the time at work, at home, and what. And so I believe that we've sectioned ourselves throughout these years. So no more of that. So I'm going to show up authentically. So I will. It'll be interesting to kind of watch those organizations and those companies. That's what they
Uh-oh.
try to do as their organization. But it'll be interesting to see what's their what's the long term financial bottom line effect for them. Yeah.
Yes, I am already, and I'm sure, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but you speak to this for you, but noticing kind of a wane of conversations around weight, race in the workplace and
Hmm.
other marginalized groups.
Hmm.
It's already kind of becoming background noise. So
Yes.
it'll be interesting to see, like you said, the long-term game that businesses will continue to do these kinds of things in their organizations to it's a marathon. It's not a
It
sprint.
is.
It should
It
be
is.
not a once a year thing and all of
Nope.
that.
Nope.
So, to go back to where we started, we talked a little bit last time about the foundation for change being understanding. How do you
Mm.
think white leaders in particular can reach sort of an understanding about race as a whole, and in particular the Black experience in America, before they can move on to make effective change in their organizations?
I back to the hard conversation again. So as a CEO, as a leader of an organization, why not just start that conversation with those groups of people? And in your organization, just ask and that's tough, right? So that's
Yeah.
that's that's tough in itself. You being a leader, you being an owner, you being a CEO, thinking now that you have to ask such and such these conversations. But just ask. I mean, because if you're employing these people, you should have, I would say, a level of care for your employees. Because people don't
You
care how
should
much you
have.
know. You should have, right? You should have. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So
Right.
let's start with that because no matter what culture you have, I always believe everything starts from the top down. right? Because it has to
Mm.
start from the top down. So if you're now, whatever culture that you've created or has evolved over time, if you're going to now create a space that people can have these conversations and starting from you, I think that in itself can break up any type of negative environment. And then from there, develop policies, procedures to have that belonging factor. Some of the things that I've always enjoyed is when we can have, food is always a wonderful thing, right? So when we can
Yeah.
have, diversity type
You're speaking
luncheons
my language
or,
now, Lesley.
when we can have like diversity luncheons and get together, we can learn so much from food, from one another. What is why did this start or whatever. Just have meaningful conversations about that. And make sure that that is an ongoing thing. It is not a once or whatever and check off a box. It's a continual thing. Because so if let's take, for instance, we're going to start with the CEO of the company that's going to have these inclusive conversations, however that they're going to set it up. So let's start from there. From that, something is developed because now the people have told you what they're looking for. And now that has developed. Now you just make sure that it's something that is done throughout the year, because it can't be a one and done, because a one and done everybody's going to say, okay, well, he had these conversations with me or she had these conversations with me, and yeah, I knew nothing was going to happen, right? Because that's what everybody's going to say. So
That's a
it
box
needs to
checker.
be, there you go, right?
Yeah.
So it needs to be a continual, whatever it is, it needs to be a continual conversation, and meaningful conversation. And back to what I said about showing up authentically, allowing people to show up. Because here's the thing, if me or you, if we can't show up authentically in the workplace, we're not going to be 100% effective, right? So what is that? That's
Yeah.
money, that's costing money to the employer. That's your bottom line. So that's the other thing that employers may not recognize, is that when someone is not showing up 100% as themselves, they're just they're dead from the neck down, because they're just showing up just to do the bare minimum, because they're not really engaged in the work. I can go back, and I may have said this in the last live, but I had an employee, this is back in the 90s. He did some amazing things. Brought your baby to work, and I'm talking about way before these things
Before it was a
were,
thing.
before it was a thing. Brought your baby to work. We had inclusive luncheons. We just had so many things. And now I look back and I said, wow, it's not that he was before his time. It was that he was caring.
Yeah.
He cared about his employees, and he showed you how much he cared. And do you know, when you have an employer that does that, you go the extra mile. Me personally, I was going to work on Sundays, didn't get paid, didn't care, because I knew how he treated us. So I think that's the other part that employers may forget. I don't care how big your company is, that still holds.
Yeah.
So create an environment where people can show up as themselves. So we don't have that code switching. So we don't have,
Yes.
we don't have, because that's huge, especially in the Black community. That's very huge, that code switching, because
Yep.
you don't, if you can't identify with it, you don't even know when it shows up in your workplace, because you
Yeah.
don't even, you have no clue that it even exists.
Awareness is everything.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
So you don't even know that's popping into your workplace. You don't even know who this person is. You think that person's name is Lesley, but somebody else is showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah. And I love what you said before, to pull out something that you were saying before. These kinds of things affect our businesses systemically. And so
mhm,
that's how we need to take action. We need to look at our hiring and recruiting
mhm,
processes. We need to look who our vendors are. We need to look at who's in the C-suite. We need to look at our onboarding. We need to look at, how meetings are conducted. It
mhm,
touches everything in your business. And so if you're not acting from that perspective, then it's not going to be effective. Like you said, it's
No.
just going to be a box check if you're just throwing some training at some people in one area of your business and call it a day.
Yeah.
And I also think intention, again, to bring it back to intention, that's so important, that it needs to come from a place of authenticity. You can't fake caring about your team.
Right.
And so that part of it is what's going to make carry you through and have the stamina to make this a marathon versus a sprint. If you truly care about your people, then you will care about what's going on in your workplace in terms of race and equity and diversity and all of those things. So
Yes.
other than understanding and kind of educating yourself and awareness, what are some other actions that business leaders, white business leaders, I want to make that distinction, can make in their businesses to kind of help their team feel like they belong?
You touched on managers and you touched on hiring. Definitely it starts at the front door. So, when I talked about policies and procedures and so forth, it definitely starts there. And even if you do have other managers that are already in place and you're now trying to shift that workplace, it really is important for your manager team to really understand that I say this all the time, it is really from the top down. Because it cannot be from the bottom up. If you, as the owner, the CEO, the ED, whatever, if this is something that you truly believe from a understanding, compassionate, human um, perspective, you really believe that this is a workplace that you're going to be intentional about us having those conversations, us moving our organization to a more equitable organization. If you believe that, then the next tier, like you said, are your managers. So I think there has to be certain things in place, maybe assessments or something like that throughout put in place, so that your managers, they don't lose sight of that, because
Hmm.
more than likely you're more diverse usually are your lower level employees. And then, like you said, take a look at your next tier. Okay, so what are we doing to develop our low level employees to get to the next level? So I think
Yes.
it's a constant flowing. It's constant because, yeah, we're gonna take a snapshot of the organization of where it is now. What does it look like now? How is it representative of our community?
Hmm.
Sometimes you hear with the police, you'll hear them say that we want to hire police officers that look like our community. I
Hmm.
think every organization needs to do that.
Yeah.
So what does the organization look like? Let's take a snapshot. We're not filling boxes. We're taking a look at our organization. And I think from there, definitely throughout the front door, really and truly monitor and see who's coming in the front door, develop intentional, I know there's a lot of different templates for hiring questions and stuff like that, but really and truly be intentional and so that you can create that workplace that you're really looking for. So starting at the front door with your policies and your procedures, taking a look at your organization right now where you are, and start wherever you are. So you
Yes.
don't have to be perfect. We're just starting where you are. If you need to bring in outside assessments or outside whatever to help you
Yes.
with that, because other people may have that more expertise rather than trying to do it in house, and you may not have that experience, do that. But really and truly, start where you are. We say that all the time in our personal lives and in our business life, right? Start where you are. So as an organization, just start where you are. It may not be pretty, but it may not be pretty, or it may be great, but still do an assessment, a
Yeah.
baseline assessment. Start where you are so that you can now create that culture. Make sure you have your core values. Let's always go back to those core values, right?
Hmm.
So whatever your core values are, If you haven't had any core values in place, let's set some of those core values up. Set up your core values, because at the end of the day, we're always going to shift and we're always going to go back to our core values. What are your core values that's going to help your organization in diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity? So that I believe
Yes.
that is how packaging it all together. Start where you are, look at what you look like now, create your core values. Everything is going to flow back to your core values. And I believe anybody doing that, hire outside a consultants or whatever if you need that. I believe doing those things.
Google is a wonderful thing, people.
There you go. I believe doing those things can create an amazing, happy workplace for any employee that will be skipping and hopping going into work, because you're at work. Whether you are at home or not, you still are at work 8, 9 hours a day.
I'd like a video of you skipping and hopping going to work. That just popped in a visual in my head right there. I'm going to work.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna do work for you.
So a couple things I want to say before we wrap up. I love
Okay.
everything that you just said. But I also want to say we, and when I say we right now, I'm talking about white leaders, are doing ourselves a disservice by not creating these workplaces and also welcoming in all these diverse points of view and ideas and perspectives and talent.
Mm,
That is doing ourselves and our business a disservice by not including those people in our workplace in a way that will be they will have a sense of belonging and feel safe and collaborate with everybody. It's so important to have, not your board of directors all look the same. And I
right.
love what you said about the younger workforce, because there's a lot of people out there who will vet your business before they apply to your business. And if
Mm-hmm.
they see C-suite that's all white men, that's a turnoff
Mm-hmm.
for the younger workforce. So
Mm-hmm.
think about that if you want to attract that top talent to your business.
Mm-hmm.
So Lesley, I'm so happy that you came on today. I feel like we could talk about this for a million days, and
We
we'll
can.
probably do this again. But is there anything you have going on out there that you want to promote or let people know where they can find you, what you've got going on right now?
You can find me. My website is The Mosaic Inc. I do have a book coming out first Q1, and the name of the book is How to Have Healthy Conversations Around Racial and Social Injustices. Because I find,
Ooh,
yeah, yeah, and it's one family at a time, one community at a time, one workplace at a time. Because
I
it,
love
for
that.
me, it starts in the household. So in the
And when will that
household,
be coming
because
out?
I believe the end of March, I'm doing
And where can we find that?
I am doing pre-orders now. I will put the I can send you the link, and if you can send it out, so I can send you the link. Yeah, I'm doing that. It's
Yes.
$20,
Perfect.
$20 for pre-orders right now. Yep.
That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Because I've had several webinars throughout this year. And what's taught me is interracial couples are not having that conversation
Mm,
because we love each other. We just assume where one side, usually the black side, is not talking about the experiences that they're having. And maybe when the white side hears that, the white side is offended. And it's not
mm.
about that. It is about our experiences that we're going through. So because of that, that just told me, okay, Leslie, yeah, we need to write something where you can have a tool. And it's not only just the interracial marriages, but also you're going to have interracial children that are coming up. So
Yes.
we this conversation for me, like I started Mosaic Inc. in 2018. So this conversation for me is not a conversation that just started now. Like you said, we talked about the awareness now, but I really this is something that needs to continue. And
Mm,
I believe people just need a tool, a quick tool where they can reference how can we have those conversations? Because from what I understand right now, there's friends of mine that families have not spoken
mm.
over different things, right? So
Yeah.
we need to start one family at a time.
Yes,
One
it
family at
can
a
be,
time, one community
it's
at a
going to
time.
be messy. It's going to be scary. Do it anyway. That's how
Yes,
important it is.
yes, yes.
Lesley George from Mosaic Inc. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see you. Happy New Year to all of
Same
you.
to you.
I am Wendy Conrad, workplace culture developer and founder of Your Happy Workplace, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
Lesley.